and start our hearing. Jan said it's okay that Henry is experienced enough to be able to take the lead right now. So good morning and happy Valentine's Day. It's appropriate that we have this hearing on Valentine's Day because we expect it to be a real positive love fest and not some of the usual hearings that we may have in Congress, or at least the ones that people see on the news. We're here to celebrate American manufacturing. But speaking of Love Fest, this is my 21st wedding anniversary as well. So as my wife is taking kids to school and getting ready for work, happy anniversary, honey. And by the way, I've got a 3D bust coming for you for Valentine's Day and our anniversary. Maybe she can put that on her nightstand and she can see me every night before bed. I'm sure every woman out there is saying that's exactly what they want. So with a subcommittee title of Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade, our first hearing could have dealt with any number of issues. The agencies and subject matter within our jurisdictions are numerous and diverse, and they all have complex issues worthy of our discussion. I would like to thank all of our witnesses here today, traveling from all parts of our nation to be here today to share their manufacturing experiences. And I have Mr. Holler from 3M. Now, while he's from Minnesota, one of their plants is in my district in Valley, Nebraska. They make respirators, masks for all over the world. And they employ over 500 people in my district. And so hopefully today Bob and some of the other witnesses can shed some light on why those chose where to manufacture. So at this point, I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. Today we're going to start from square one by focusing on a sector which has undoubtedly served as a core building block in securing America's greatness, and that's our manufacturing. Our goal is simple: to hear directly from the individuals most immediately affected by U.S. manufacturing policies, the manufacturers themselves, and gain a clearer understanding about what is right with American manufacturing today and what can be done to make it even better tomorrow. We will hear from 8 different business leaders representing a broad cross-section of U.S. manufacturing, companies making everything from glass used for iPods and smartphones to respirator masks to missile defense systems. My hope is that a wide range of ideas and perspectives will surface during the discussion that can, in a matter of speaking, set the table for more specific manufacturing topics and will be tackled down the road. While today's discussion will likely be wide-ranging, subsequent hearings could focus on specific manufacturing sectors like autos, auto parts, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, energy, and steel. Why have we chosen to kick off the 113th Congress with a series of hearings covering a topic as broad as the state of U.S. manufacturing? The Bipartisan Manufacturing Showcase this morning, which highlighted 60 products from 20 different districts on this subcommittee, says it all. In the districts represented on our subcommittee alone, manufacturing accounts for over 800,000 jobs, which pay an average of $77,000 nationally, according to NAM. In Nebraska alone, the manufacturing sector consists of over 37,000 jobs just in 2011. One would think that given this morning's showcase and these impressive statistics that the United States was living up to the surtitle of our hearing, which is Our Nation's Builders. Unfortunately, with each passing year, this title becomes more representative of our past and less so of our future. The domestic manufacturing sector was hit the hardest in terms of job losses during this Great Recession. While manufacturing jobs account for just 1/10 of the nation's jobs, this sector suffered 1/3 of the nation's job losses. To be clear, during a time of record unemployment, roughly 33% of the jobs lost were in the manufacturing sector. To paint an even starker picture of the state of U.S. manufacturing, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation reported that the manufacturing sector suffered an average 3.1% per year decline from 2000 to 2011, resulting in an average job loss of nearly 1,300 jobs per day. One answer could be working to create an environment where companies already here see it worth their while to expand here. We often talk about job creation, and President Obama devoted a significant piece of his State of the Union to it, but what does job creation really mean? That's why you're here. We want companies manufacturing abroad to come to America, make investments in capital, and take advantage of the most productive manufacturing labor workforce in the world. Because I truly believe that our labor is second to none. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, on average, manufacturers of all sizes spend over $14,000 per employee to comply with regulations. Even when taking into account environmental regulations alone, manufacturers spend $7,200 per employee in regulatory compliance. No wonder it costs more to manufacture in the U.S. I agree with the President. We need to focus here in Congress on how we attract more jobs to our shores. We need to ask how we can equip people with the skills needed for the jobs that will power the engine of job creation. Manufacturing doesn't just create jobs, it creates great, high-paying jobs, and it creates jobs in other sectors. Manufacturing has one of the strongest multiplier effects in the economy. Every $1 in direct spending produces an additional $1.35 in indirect outputs. But the benefits of manufacturing don't stop there. A strong manufacturing base is key to closing our trade deficit and to sustaining a U.S. economy that can be a leader in the global economy in the long term. I look forward to hearing all of your testimony. At this time, I yield back my 12 seconds and yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Terry, and I want to congratulate you on your new role as chairman of this wonderful subcommittee. I'm pleased to serve as the ranking Democrat. I also want to thank you and all the staff that helped to put together that wonderful display of manufacturing, and a special thank you to Michelle Ash and Will Wallace on of the Democratic staff for helping make that happen. Our subcommittee has oversight over many areas that are of critical importance to the American people: consumer protection, product and auto safety, travel and tourism, interstate and foreign commerce, privacy and trade, and manufacturing, which is our focus today. In this Congress, I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, to find areas where we can all advance the priorities of the American people. Manufacturing is a great place to start. I'm pleased to welcome as a witness Joe Block, the Vice President of Block Steel, located in my district in Skokie, Illinois. Block Steel is a great American success story, founded in 1948 and is run today, 65 years later, by the descendants of the founders. They have about 60 employees, are a union shop with good wages and health benefits. As the country's largest aluminized steel distributor, they're a critical supplier to the automotive, appliance, and HVAC industries, and I'm sure all of our witnesses could attest. The sector has changed dramatically from the images that many of us still have of the giant factories with long assembly lines. We are seeing major leaps in the area of advanced manufacturing, where a skilled and educated workforce and groundbreaking technology play a key role. Like traditional manufacturing jobs, advanced manufacturing jobs are good jobs and can be filled by workers with a range of training. The growth of the industry is good news for building the middle class, a theme the President focused on earlier this week in the State of the Union address. And the industry is growing. After years of job losses, manufacturing is a bright spot as we come out of the Great Recession. In my state of Illinois, 40,000 new manufacturing jobs have been created since December 2009, one of the top 5 states in the country for growth in manufacturing jobs. More than 500,000 manufacturing jobs have been created nationwide since the end of 2009. The manufacturing industry requires a few basic things, including investment in innovation, good and reliable infrastructure, and an educated and skilled workforce that will fill the millions of good jobs that manufacturing can produce. I'm extremely concerned about proposed cuts to federal investments in these areas, including what we would see under sequestration. This hearing will give us the opportunity to examine more closely the successes and challenges the industry is facing, and I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses. And I certainly hope you will also help us understand how we can be better partners to help grow our manufacturing sector. I would like to yield the balance of my time to my colleague, Mr. Welch.
I thank the ranking member. I want to brag a little bit. We've got Mr. Saxton from Geld Wind here, and Geld Wind is a company with a national presence, but it has 2 facilities in Vermont and has been a great contributor to our Vermont economy. It's combining skilled manufacturing, creating very good jobs in a state that has lost a lot of jobs. We used to have a big machine tool industry in Springfield, Vermont, and we more or less have lost it. Geld Wind has come in and is a manufacturing facility that has created 800 very good paying jobs in Windsor County, which is where I'm from, and I used to be a state senator before I got demoted to Congress. And so we're very proud of Geld Wind, which combines very good manufacturing practices, high technology, good employee relationships, and energy efficiency. Uses certified wood. It makes windows in doors that are tremendous in insulating homes, saving energy. And we've had big debates about energy policy on this committee, and they'll continue. But there seems to be a good deal of bipartisan support for the notion that anything that creates good jobs and allows energy efficiency to save homeowners and building owners money is a really good thing. So I really want to welcome Mr. Saxton and thank you for all the good work that Geld Wind is doing in Vermont. Thank you.
At this time, I'd recognize the full committee chairman, Mr. Upton, for 5 minutes.
Well, again, congratulations, Mr. Chairman, for your first hearing. I was very impressed with the demonstration downstairs that many of us participated in. You know, when Henry Ford built his first horseless carriage in Michigan, Michigan began its journey as the face of the American automobile manufacturing. We later supplied our military with vehicles during times of war and filled the burgeoning consumer demand that followed. And we've experienced the pains of a changing automobile industry, certainly over the last several decades, but I'm very pleased with the resurgence of manufacturing. But much like the rest of the country, Michigan's economy is far more diversified now. Manufacturing, and not just auto-related, is still extremely important to our economy, producing $70 billion in output in 2011 and accounting for 16% of our state's GDP. In my own district, we have more than 660 manufacturers who employ 10 or more folks, accounting for nearly 50,000 of the jobs in my district. Statewide, the manufacturing industry directly employs over 500,000 Michiganders, and as each of those jobs produces others upstream and downstream in Michigan and elsewhere. So we're pleased with this subcommittee and the hearing, and I would yield to the vice chair of the full committee, Ms. Blackburn from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we all want to welcome you. We're delighted that you're here and delighted to have bipartisan support for growing the manufacturing footprint in this country. I do want to say that today we have welcomed Nissan North America, and they are located right there in my district and right outside of the district, have a facility where they manufacture the Pathfinder, the Maxima, the Infiniti JX. Bodine Aluminum is also present with us today, and they do an engine block that is in the Camry and the RAV4. So we're delighted with those. Mr. Steiner, I welcome you. Your Gorilla Glass, which is a product that I've referenced more than once, in this committee is produced there in conjunction with work from Dorfer in Nashville, and we appreciate that. And at this time, I yield to Mr. Barton of Texas.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. I want to take my brief time to introduce to the committee Eric Myers. He and his father, who's sitting behind him, own Oil City Oil Works in Corsicana, Texas. Foundry founded over 125 years ago. The first major oil field west of the Mississippi was discovered in Corsicana in 1895. The first oil refinery west of the Mississippi, Magnolia Petroleum, now part of ExxonMobil, shortly followed. The Myers family has been providing through their foundry the basic building blocks for industrial might for America, as I said, for over 125 years. Eric has got a master's degree and an undergraduate degree. He and his father have a company that has no debt. They provide over 250 good-paying jobs in Corsicana, Texas. In his spare time, Eric is the emergency manager for Navarro County, which he self-funds. If there's a tornado within 100 miles, he's there. And 2 years ago, we had a tornado in Rice, Texas. He was there before the Highway Patrol was there. So, Eric, we welcome you, and we look forward to your testimony. With that, I want to yield to my good friend from New Jersey, Mr. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Barton, and congratulations to you, Chairman Terry, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve as Vice Chair of the subcommittee. And I look forward to working in a bipartisan fashion to generate new ideas and increase regulatory efficiencies that will benefit our nation's manufacturing sector. I welcome those who have participated in the showcase from the area of New Jersey I represent, Ortho Clinical Diagnostics, a J&J affiliate in Raritan, New Jersey, Byler of America, based in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which works with J&J to create extremely small needles for sutures, Voltaics, an electronics chemicals company manufacturing specialty gases in Branchburg, New Jersey, Allstate Legal, an engraving and stationery manufacturer in Cranford, New Jersey, and Cool Corporation, a third-generation commercial egg washing manufacturer that opened its doors in Flemington, New Jersey in 1909. I look forward to working with manufacturing operations throughout the nation to determine how Congress can be a partner in future growth. And I yield to Congressman Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. And I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Rick Hughes of Raytheon Company, who serves as the president of Raytheon Space and Airborne Systems, a division that is a leading provider of products that give military forces the most accurate and timely information on today's network-centric battlefield. One product under his purview is Raytheon's active electronically scanned array, or AESA radar. These radars are an integral piece in the U.S. military's tactical aircraft fleet, as well as a number of our foreign allies' aircraft. We have over 700 Mississippians who work at the Raytheon facility in Mississippi that are responsible for assembling these highly technological and life-saving radars. Raytheon takes advantage of Mississippi's track record of being business-friendly, its skilled and plentiful workforce, and its quality workforce training programs. We look forward to hear from you today, and we welcome you, Mr. Hughes, and appreciate you being here today. And with that, I will yield to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Guthrie.
At this time, I've got to interrupt because you are out of time. So what we're going to do is go to 5 minutes over here, and we'll do a unanimous consent so the others can introduce. Fair? So I recognize the gentleman from California, the full committee ranking member, Mr. Waxman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to congratulate you on your new chairmanship of the important subcommittee, which is holding its very first hearing today. I also want to welcome Ms. Schakowsky as the subcommittee's new Democratic ranking member. I look forward to working with both of you and our colleagues as we continue our oversight over interstate commerce and strive to ensure common sense consumer protections for all Americans. A strong manufacturing sector is vital to our identity as a nation. It's a source of countless scientific breakthroughs and is essential to maintaining our national defense capabilities. Manufacturing is also a key building block for a strong and stable middle class in this country. In my home state of California, the manufacturing sector adds more than $200 billion to the economy and employs more than 1.2 million people. In the Los Angeles area, particularly the South Bay region, this is one of the country's greatest centers of defense and aerospace manufacturing, and I have the great honor to have been elected to represent this area. It's also home to several promising manufacturers of energy efficiency technology. This morning, I'm proud to showcase examples of manufacturing from El Segundo and Redondo Beach in my district. Nano H2O displayed an industry-leading energy-efficient reverse osmosis membrane that it has developed for desalination purposes. Northrop Grumman displayed 2 aerospace products it is manufacturing for the federal government, the Navy's FA-18 Super Hornet strike fighter and NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. And I'm also pleased to recognize Mr. Hughes from Raytheon, who is centered in El Segundo, and Raytheon has facilities in Mississippi, but it is headquartered in the South Bay, and we're pleased to have you with us. Tuesday's State of the Union address reaffirmed the President's dedication to making the nation a magnet for new jobs and manufacturing through the development of manufacturing innovation institutes. The President's proposals for targeted investments in education, infrastructure, and clean energy will also help grow the manufacturing sector. There is one big threat to manufacturing looming on the horizon. For the health of the manufacturing sector and the economy as a whole, Congress should work to avert the massive arbitrary spending cuts set to take effect on March 1. The sequester should be replaced with a balanced, responsible deficit reduction plan. It's time to return certainty and predictability to our manufacturers, small businesses, American families, and our entire economy. Our manufacturing sector has accomplished great things. The U.S. can continue to be at the forefront of global manufacturing, creating transformative technologies for years to come, but Congress must do its part. We can't expect our economy to rebound if we keep dragging the economy down with obstacles to growth, like the sequester. I'm looking forward to the testimony from our witnesses. I must apologize that there's another subcommittee meeting at the exact same time, and I have to go down there to that subcommittee hearing as well. I'll come back as soon as I'm able to, but I want to welcome all of them.
Henry, you actually have a little bit of time left. Our clock is off. If you would like to yield to Mr. Barrow.
I do want to yield the balance of my time, which I assume is substantial, to Mr. Barrow from Georgia.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to congratulate Mr. Terry on his being elected as chairman of the committee and thank him for holding this hearing on manufacturing in America. Most folks agree that American manufacturing is good for our country, but American manufacturing is good for other countries as well. In my district, goods that are made in America are literally running the rest of the world. Fram Renewable Fuels is doing just that. As one of the first wood pellet producers and exporters in the Southeast, they manufacture fuel that serves in place of coal to generate electricity to utility companies around the world. I had the honor of visiting Fram on a manufacturing tour in my district last fall, and I was impressed by the sophistication of their operation, which is responsible for exporting over 375,000 metric tons of wood pellets each year. I've seen the difference that they're making through manufacturing, and I look forward to the testimony of Fram's president, Mr. Harold Arnold, as we examine how we can better support America's manufacturers and continue to be a nation of builders. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow. The time has run out. I would ask unanimous consent for 2 additional minutes on the majority side so that 2 members can introduce their guests. Hearing none, we'll have 2 minutes. And Mr. Guthrie, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Jim Steiner. He's the Vice President for Corning Special Materials and General Manager of the Harrodsburg, Kentucky plant that makes Gorilla Glass, which if you don't know what it is, if you have an iPhone in your pocket or if you have an iPad in front of you, you're touching it every time you tap on the glass to get to your areas you want to go to. And this product is emblematic of cooperation between a couple of great American innovators, and where they always say good enough is never good enough. And we appreciate you being here. I've enjoyed touring your facility. It's a wonderful place. I also point out in the room below, there's another manufacturer. The gateway to the Bourbon Trail is Claremont, Kentucky, and there is Jim Beam and you saw Booker's in Knob Creek down there in Basil Hayden, and also Toyota, which is not in my district, a manufacturing plant, but have a lot of part suppliers, is down there as well. They're in Georgetown, Kentucky. So with that, I yield to Mr. Bilirakis.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome and thank Mr. Jeff Smatsky and Zephyr Hills Water for their appearance today. Mr. Smatsky serves as a factory manager at the Zephyr Hills Water Plant in Zephyr Hills, Florida, in my district, the 12th Congressional District of Florida. The 258 employees at the Zephyr Hills plant produce both the Zephyr Hills and the Nestle Pure Life brands of bottled water and a variety of single-serve and bulk containers ranging from 8 ounces to 5-gallon water cooler containers, which are distributed to homes in Florida, offices in Florida, all across Florida. Zephyr Hills serves a valuable role in Pasco County, a community that I represent, and the Tampa Bay area in Florida as well, all of Florida. His testimony will shed light on the state of our economy and how we may be able to spur economic growth in this vital sector. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bilirakis. And all of our witnesses have been introduced by their sponsoring member. So we will begin our testimony. Mr. Hughes, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and committee members. On behalf of his Raytheon constituents, I also want to thank Congressman Harper. As president of Raytheon Company's Space and Airborne Systems business, I'm honored to be here representing our company and discussing our contributions to America's manufacturing infrastructure. Thank you for the opportunity to share the many ways that Raytheon, and in particular Forest, Mississippi Consolidated Manufacturing Center, contribute to America's national security, global competitiveness, and economic prosperity. While my focus will be on Raytheon's forest operations, I would be remiss if I failed to note Raytheon's manufacturing footprint covers many other states, and our suppliers' operations expand that economic footprint even further. As a member of the defense and aerospace industry, Raytheon proudly competes in a market that contributed $218 billion in overall sales to the United States economy in 2012. Raytheon specializes in defense, homeland security, and related mission support services, providing state-of-the-art electronics, mission systems integration, and other capabilities in the areas of sensing, effects, command, control, communications, and intelligence and cyber security. But more importantly, the work we do and the products we design and manufacture in places like Forest save lives and make the world a safer place. Raytheon's ability to succeed in the global marketplace requires skilled, well-trained, and dedicated workforce, a stable fiscal, tax, and regulatory environment, and the ability to export our products to United States' allies. In fact, as our domestic budget faces increased pressure, defense exports can help decrease costs and risks associated with technological advances for the U.S. military, support America's industrial base, and strengthen our balance of trade. Our operation at Forest, Mississippi contributes significantly to Raytheon's capability and reputation for manufacturing excellence. Our legacy in Mississippi stretches back to 1983, when we opened our doors in support of a single military radar program. Over the years, we've increased the scope and scale of our operations in Forest, expanded our facility, added jobs, and broadened the array of products built. Today, we have over 700 employees in Forest. They are some of the most skilled laborers in the country. They work in a 340,000 square foot state-of-the-art manufacturing space, building sophisticated airborne, ground-based radars, electronic warfare technology, and advanced communication systems for use by U.S. and allied warfighters. Thanks to Forest, we have delivered more than 500 active electronically scanned arrays, or AESA radars, an industry first that we will soon celebrate with our Mississippi employees. The AESA radar is used on our military fighter planes to greatly increase their ability to detect and track airborne targets. Its capabilities also allow our pilots to identify multiple targets at once. This technology provides game-changing performance and tactical advantages, enabling warfighters to accomplish their mission and return home safely to their families. This radar and the lives it protects are a source of tremendous pride for the Raytheon workers who build it. Our radars have logged more than 400,000 cumulative operational flight hours on Air Force, Navy, and Marine tactical aircraft. Between 2004 and 2011, Raytheon ramped up its AESA production rates tenfold, with a 100% on-time delivery rate in 2012. This efficiency supports our customers' growing needs and demonstrates our ability to further increase production and jobs as we win additional contracts. In particular, foreign sales of U.S. military aircraft are an important growth area for Raytheon, the industry, and our country. As of last year, 3 key military aircraft production lines, the C-17, the F-15, and the F-16, were being extended largely by international export demand. These foreign sales drive increased demand for radars built in Mississippi. Whether driven by domestic or international sales, increased demand for Raytheon's products significantly enhances the economies of the United States and Mississippi. In 2012, Raytheon operations contributed over $38 million in payroll to employees in the state. In most cases, our employees earned almost double the average annual Mississippi salary.
Get to the conclusion.
Beyond our employees, we estimate that Raytheon's overall economic activities generated more than 400 additional jobs. Much of our success in forest also is tied to the quality of our local regional suppliers, who range in size from small business to Fortune 100 corporations. In 2012, for example, we spent nearly $6 million with 60 Mississippi suppliers. Finally, I want to point out the strong partnership that Raytheon has established with the federal, state, and local officials who count on our forest employees and the facility as their constituents. This partnership is vital to our manufacturing process. Raytheon and the men and women of Forest, Mississippi produce complex, cutting-edge technologies that protect our nation, help our warfighters, their vital missions, and contribute to our nation's economic prosperity. We are proud of these employees and their many accomplishments.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Appreciate your testimony. There are what we call the shot clocks, little monitors there on your desk, and it'll turn to yellow at 1 minute left. So if you hit 1 minute and have a couple pages left, maybe skip a couple of them. We're really anxious to get to questions. So at this time, Mr. Steiner, appreciate you. You're from Corning, representing Corning.
I'm Chairman Terry and Ranking Member Chakowski. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Jim Steiner. I'm responsible for the specialty materials business in Corning. It includes our Corning Gorilla Glass business and our factory in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I'd also like to thank you because we do have a small aerospace and defense business, and you set me aside of one of our customers today. I'd also like to thank Congressman Guthrie, who represents our facility in Harrodsburg. He's personally witnessed the success of Gorilla Glass manufacturing, and we appreciate his interest and support. Many of the members, I notice, are actively touching our product as we speak, so I thank you for also being a user of Gorilla Glass. We've been in business for over 160 years. Corning was founded by the great-great-grandfather of Amo Houghton, who many of you serve with here in Congress, and Amo sends his best. Innovation and invention are keys to Corning's success over its long history. It includes the invention of many life-changing things like the catalytic converter, optical fiber, and glass for liquid crystal displays. Today I want to tell you the story of Gorilla Glass, an American success story. It's a good enough story that I shouldn't be able to screw it up. We invented in 1962, when Amo Houghton was our president, a material we called ChemCore. It was a chemically strengthened glass we actually saw as a way to compete with the steel industry. It was a cool invention. The issue was we never really found any mass markets to commercialize it in, so it never became a success. In 2006, a small group in my division worked on taking the ChemCore base and inventing a new glass that could be used on mobile devices. In late 2006, we did a small development run, and once again, we thought we had a really cool invention, but we needed a way to commercialize it. Then along came Steve Jobs and Apple. In early 2007, as Apple was approaching the launch of the iPhone, they had originally designed the phone with a plastic cover. And as Steve Jobs did the first exhibition of the iPhone, as he walked off the stage, he looked down at it, and the plastic was scratched. So he told his team that he wanted to use glass, and he took an active role in finding a solution. He called our chairman, Wendell Weeks, and he challenged us to provide a glass that he could use for the launch of the iPhone. Luckily, we had done the small development run, and we had the invention. The challenge was we had to take that invention and commercialize it, and the iPhone was due to launch in 3 months. So we went to our factory in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, and gave them 3 months to take a glass composition and develop the manufacturing process and make the initial shipments in May of 2007. Now, typically for us, a glass development will take years, even decades, to go from invention to commercialization, but we had 3 months this time. We challenged the Harrodsburg plant, and they pulled it off. Now, this only happened because of a close working relationship with Apple and the opportunity to meet that timeline and launch on their product. We got a very quick start in 2007. Our first year sales were $19 million, which sales for a new product in the first year of $19 million are quite significant. But we've grown significantly. We're now on over 1 billion devices out in the field. We have 33 different customers. And in 2012, I'm happy to say we broke $1 billion in revenue. See what I mean? It's a tough story to screw up. So our employment in Harrodsburg now is well over 400 jobs. We are running the factory full. Back in 2008, we got as low as about 1/5 of our capacity, but the success of our work in Harrodsburg to bring up the manufacturing has allowed us to continue to invest in Harrodsburg. Last year, we started up 2 new melting tanks to make additional glass, and we've invested over $240 million in the Harrodsburg facility for new production capacity. That success of Gorilla Glass has also allowed us to spend more in research and development in our Corning, New York facilities. We've recently expanded our capabilities in Corning to do additional specialty flat glasses, and have spent about $200 million in capital in that facility too. And we believe over 1,000 people in Corning are now supported by the success of the Gorilla business. So our next product we're working on and we've invested in Harrodsburg is Willow Glass. This is Willow Glass. It's 100-micron thick glass, about the thickness of your human hair. It's a cool invention, and now we're looking for where to commercialize that. So I thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Mr. Haller from 3M, you were recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Chachkowski, and members of the committee. My name is Bob Haller. I am the Director of the Respiratory Protection Business of the Personal Safety Division for the 3M Company. The 3M Valley plant in Nebraska.
Yeah, is your mic on or too close?
The 3M Valley plant in Nebraska is the primary manufacturing site for a complete range of 3M respiratory protective equipment
including disposable and reusable respirator protection and surgical masks, along with medical electrodes, patient warming plates, sorbent materials, hearing and eye protection. As a manufacturer of personal protective equipment, one of our most pressing issues facing our Valley facility is making sure that America's workers are not only able to address the day-to-day safety needs, but also that our nation is prepared to respond to threats and hazards that pose a risk to our country. This is an issue that the 3M Valley alone cannot address. It needs to be a shared responsibility with many stakeholders, both public and private, and today I'd like to focus on our roles. The role of government is to own the leadership position in prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery of national threats and hazards. They need to ensure that the proper protective equipment is integrated into the capabilities of protection, response, and recovery. Although the nation has made great strides in preparing against threats and hazards, we feel the role of personal protective equipment is not being fully leveraged in national preparedness. For example, the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act is intended for us to improve our nation's public health and medical preparedness and response capabilities for all emergency. And the strategic intent is to advance countermeasures to diagnose, mitigate, prevent, or treat harm from any biological agent, toxin, chemical, radiological, or nuclear agent or agents, whether naturally occurring, unintentional, or deliberate. However, the definition of countermeasures is so narrow that it only recognizes FDA-cleared respiratory protection devices. FDA-cleared respirators only represent a small segment of the devices, and the capacity to produce these devices is very limited. Plus, they do not provide protection against chemical, radiological, or nuclear agents. 3M feels the definition for countermeasures should be expanded to include the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health approved devices, and as such, the strategic direction would match its intent, while also expanding the scope of products that would be available during an event. Additionally, if the definition is expanded, it could open up new opportunities and benefits to manufacturers to engage in developing technologies that may increase protection from many types of hazards. Another key area that needs addressing centers on preparing and responding to an event. The time to secure personal protective equipment for our responders and the general population is before, not after, an event. 3M has played a major role in providing PPE during many major events over the last 12 years, from 9/11 to H1N1. And producing and delivering product during an event is extremely challenging from all aspects, to the manufacturing process, to raw material availability, to capacity, and to who gets the product and when. We have two recommendations. First, the government should work more closely with manufacturers on plans on how to ramp up production and delivery when an event occurs. The second, nations should secure and maintain a stockpile of product with necessary types of PPE that will be available to both responders and the civilian population. For example, prior to H1N1, the national stockpile of N95 respirators was over 103 million, and the majority of these were shipped during that event. Today's N95 stockpile, by our reports, sits only at 17 million. As one of the world's largest designers and producers of PPE, 3M would like to work closely with all stakeholders in the mission to protect our nation and responding to emergency events. We thank the chairman and ranking member and the committee for the opportunity today to share these thoughts, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with all on this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holler. Now, Mr. Myers from Oil City Iron Works.
Good morning. Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee, and from my district, Congressman Barton, I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today to discuss the opportunities and challenges facing our company in the foundry industry, as well as ways to make American metal casters and manufacturing more competitive in the global marketplace. My name is Eric Myers, president of Oil City Iron Works. I am a third-generation Texas metal caster. We employ close to 250 folks there at our foundry. Our foundry has been in existence for 125 years, with our family operating it close to 50 years. We manufacture thousands of different types of iron castings, ranging in weight from 2 to 8,500 pounds, for the energy, mining, agriculture, waterworks, and transportation sectors. Metal castings are the foundation for all other manufacturing, and metal casters are a vital building block for every nation's economic wealth. Every sector from agriculture, construction, healthcare, mining to automotive, aerospace, and defense relies on castings. In fact, 90% of all manufactured goods and capital equipment incorporate engineered castings into their makeup. Oil City Iron Works supplies valves and pumps for power generation, gas turbine and compression parts, and general oil field equipment parts to well-known companies such as Caterpillar, Halliburton, and FMC, as well as many other smaller ones. During the State of the Union address, President Obama called for a variety of energy initiatives, including expedited oil and gas permitting and increased funding for infrastructure. As part of his energy agenda, the President should move to approve the building of the Keystone Pipeline to bring oil from Canada to the Gulf Coast. The growth in the energy sector has provided significantly more work for Oil City and our industry, which has led to more jobs and lower domestic natural gas prices over the past few years. Establishing new stringent regulations on our energy sector will not only hinder foundries and domestic manufacturers, but the long-term health of the economy and the prosperity of American workers. Today, the U.S. metal casting industry is comprised of 2,000 facilities, with 80% employing 100 workers or less. Our sector is truly one of small business. Unfortunately, over 300 foundries have shut their doors over the past 5 years. This reduction can be directly attributed to the recession, foreign competition, and onslaught of regulations. Our government has created barriers to competitiveness and making it harder than ever for the manufacturer in the United States. There are a number of roadblocks that stand in the way of competitiveness, and I'm going to focus on just 3 key issues in my verbal comments today. Number 1, federal regulations. Unfortunately, over the past several years, we have not seen sensible and cost-beneficial regulation being proposed by EPA, OSHA, Department of Labor, and the NLRB. I want to highlight a proposed rule under development by OSHA of serious concern to the foundry industry. The agency has submitted its proposed rule for crystalline silica sand to OMB for review that is expected to mandate extensive and costly engineering controls. We believe the best way to protect our workers is stronger enforcement of the current regulations. A recent economic study reveals that the annual compliance cost of such a rule will likely reach $5.5 billion for all industry sectors, including manufacturing, construction, and shipbuilding. The foundry industry is estimated to face compliance costs of roughly $2 billion per year, and that is for engineering and ancillary costs alone. OSHA's potential new regulation would amount to about a 6% factor of U.S. foundry revenues for 2007, making our sector one of the most heavily impacted among all those affected. This regulatory cost burden would be very difficult for our industry to bear. Number 2, the shortage of skilled workers. Adding to the challenges of regulatory overreach is the fact that approximately hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs remain unfilled due to the lack of qualified applicants. Despite an unemployment rate hovering near 8%, manufacturers are still struggling to find jobs, to fill jobs. Foundries rely on a variety of skilled workers to maintain and grow their companies, including machinists, electricians, welders, and pattern makers. Many of these positions have taken a long time, as long as 7 months to years to fill. For example, our Class A electrician position has been open for nearly 2 years with no qualified applicants. We have approached an area technical school to send graduating welders to us for possible employment. However, all of those graduates are already promised positions with other Texas-based companies. Currently, we are working with our local college to implement a certificate program for welding. Number 3, tax policies. We need fair and competitive tax policies. Depreciation is an area of the tax law where uncertainty has significant impact on our capital expenditures and decisions. The difference is 50% bonus depreciation, 100% depreciation, and no bonus depreciation is substantial. The change in the tax law determines whether we purchase an asset this year or perhaps not at all, or whether we hire additional workers. In conclusion, Oil City understands and supports the need for reasonable regulations to protect the environment, worker safety, and health. But we also recognize that our industry and the entire manufacturing sector are facing unprecedented pressures in their efforts to remain competitive in the global economy. To continue manufacturing momentum and promote hiring, the United States needs not just improved economic conditions, but also government policies that are more attuned to the realities of global competition. In this current economy, it is clear that cost-ineffective regulations and increases in taxes dampen economic growth and will continue to hold down job creation. For some foundries, it will be the final straw that destroys their whole business. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Mr. Smatsky from Zephyr Hills, Florida.
Thank you, Chairman Terry, Member Schakowsky. It's a pleasure to be here today. I assure you I'll honor my time commitments. I'd like to thank Congressman Billikris for his leadership in our district and to congratulate him on joining this prestigious committee. I'd also like to point out there's an additional Nestle Waters facility connected with spring sources located in Congresswoman Blackburn's district in Hohenwald, Tennessee. I'd like to thank the Congresswoman for her support and friendship. Zephyr Hills brand spring water was established in 1964. It's one of 5 regional spring brands for Nestle Waters North America. It's the primary brand produced and manufactured out of our factory in Zephyr Hills, Florida. Zephyr Hills spring water comes from natural springs located in Zephyr Hills area, as well as other carefully selected spring sources across Florida. Today, 70% of what Americans drink either comes in a can, in a bottle, or another container. We take pride in producing healthful beverage bottles. In Zephyr Hills, Florida, we produce the Zephyr Hills Natural Spring Water, Nestle Pure Life Purified Water, along with Deer Park Spring Water, which is also bottled out of our sister factory in Madison County, Florida. At Zephyr Hills, we are proud not only produce great quality bottled water, but as well as have great quality jobs. A couple statistics about our factory. Our plant was built in 1990. We employ 258 full-time employees. We also additionally bring on 30 seasonal employees to cover peak season demands. The plant produces Zephyr Hills and Nestle Pure Life in single-serve containers, as well as the 5-gallon water cooler containers, which are distributed to homes and offices across Florida. Our spring water is piped to the factory and in some cases tankered, at which point it goes through a state-of-the-art, multifaceted, multi-stage quality process and ends with a hygienically sealed bottle that ensures food safety and quality in the marketplace. Preforms, which come from our sister factory in Madison County, are made into bottles in our blow molders. They're then filled, capped, labeled, packed, wrapped, palletized, wrapped again, prepared for shipment, all within the 4 walls of our facility. Across Florida, Nestle Waters employs 1,000 people with an annual payroll of $42 million. We spend an additional $80 million with Florida-based business partners, community engagement activities, as well as distribution networks. Incidentally, Madison County plant was the first LEED certified factory in the state of Florida. Our company is committed to both understanding water resources and sharing that understanding with the community. Our showcase partnership in Zephyr Hills is with Crystal Springs Preserve. This 525-acre nonprofit sanctuary has been restored to its natural spring habitat and houses an educational facility which is visited by more than 35,000 students annually. Last month, we just launched a traveling science center with the Crystal Springs Preserve. It's called Water Ventures. It's really cool. It's a 53-foot semi-trailer that has been customized to provide a museum-quality-like platform for water education and encouraging positive stewardship for Florida's diverse watersheds. Bottled water has the lightest environmental footprint of any packaged beverage. We're intensely focused on lightening that footprint even further. We want and need our bottles back so that we can achieve cradle-to-cradle recycling and reuse. And we made a commitment to be the bottled water industry leader at 60% recycling rate for all plastic bottles nationwide. Mr. Chairman, you may not always hear from the industry representatives who are generally pleased with how they're regulated by the federal government, but bottled water is one such industry. Under the jurisdiction of the FDA, bottled water is one of the most regulated food products in the country. For example, every day every line across 29 facilities throughout the United States. Our product is tested, quality inspected at least 200 times to ensure that we meet and exceed FDA requirements and our own internal quality standards. The FDA regulations are even stronger since the enactment of the Food Safety Modernization Act, and we feel that we and the rest of the industry are regulated appropriately and in accordance with all laws at the highest standards of our consumers. One area where we are not currently regulated at a federal level, where we may be able to find some bipartisan and some compromise, is with the issue of labeling and consumers' right to know. We believe that Americans have the right to know where their water is from and what's in it. In recent years, there's been an effort by some in Congress to introduce one federal standard for bottled water labeling and transparency, and we have, in our industry association, look forward to working with this committee on ideas for such a legislative approach. In closing, I'd like to thank again Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, as well as Congressman Balakras, and the committee members for your attention today. We applaud your leadership in assessing the current climate for manufacturing in America today and finding ways to improve it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Block from Block Steel, who's Jan witnessed today, thank you for coming from Chicago.
Thank you, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, distinguished members of the subcommittee. I really appreciate being here today because I think my company has a fantastic story to tell. We've been in business since 1948. That's 65 years. We're in our 65th year. And the story of our company, I believe, especially post-World War II, tracks a lot of the issues that are happening with American manufacturing. I'd like to talk a little bit about my company, and while I do, I hope this illuminates some of the issues that are not only specific with Block Steel Corporation, but in general to those of small to medium-sized U.S. manufacturers. I think with the knowledge of these issues and an understanding of their ramifications, public policy can be fashioned which more effectively supports the growth and sustainability of U.S. manufacturing, especially for the smaller and medium-sized businesses such as Block Steel Corporation. Block Steel Corp represents a great American success story, and for the past 65 years, we have adapted to the changes which have occurred in the manufacturing base in the United States. Located in Congressman Schakowsky's district, we were actually previously on the west side of Chicago. We began by supplying a lot of the companies that today don't even exist, such as Zenith Electric, who made television sets, Sunbeam Appliance, and a company called the Hurley Electric Company, which was, their product was Thor washing machines. And they were actually the first company to produce an electric washer that we know today, although there's a little bit of debate about who was the first. Those companies really don't exist anymore. In fact, at one time in the 70s, Zenith Electric was our largest customer. This is for those of us that don't remember or are of a certain age. Television sets used to be big steel boxes and used a lot of material. And how we've adapted to those changes and the change in our customer base, I think, represents some of the changes that have occurred to American manufacturing over the years. Certainly televisions today are not produced with the quantity of steel, and to the best of my knowledge, they're not produced even in the United States anymore. We made a decision in the 60s and early 70s based upon the request of one of our customers to get into a product called aluminized steel. Aluminized steel is aluminum-coated sheet steel. I have a piece of it here, and I can show it to you. And it's used primarily in HVAC, automotive applications. It's used in any application where heat and corrosion resistance is needed. We have become the premier supplier of aluminized steel in the United States and really in North America, and we're really known worldwide for that product. What I think is interesting is that we are in the middle of a supply chain, so we buy from the mills which produce steel, and then we sell to manufacturers which use that steel to make a product, whether it's an automobile or a fireplace or an appliance. So we see both sides of some of the arguments which have to do with trade. I'd like to really quickly quote this is from Thomas J. Gibson, and he is the president of the American Iron and Steel Institute. And I don't agree entirely with what he says, but I think it points out some of the issues that we all have to deal with, because there's a real dichotomy in dealing with which side of the equation you're on with trade and manufacturing. He was responding to President Obama's speech the other night, and he said, "We need to recognize," and I'm quoting here, "the massive trade imbalance we have with China and the fact that China operates with a built-in competitive advantage by undervaluing its currency. China has at least 200 million tons of excess production capacity in steel that is almost double the size of our entire domestic industry. The President needs to take action to address the import surge we are facing in steel, including declaring China a currency manipulator and working with Congress to pass tougher trade enforcement legislation like the Enforce Act." Really quick, there's two sides to that story. Manufacturers want cheap steel wherever they can get it, but the steel mills want protection so that they obviously can protect their market. Thank you.
Perfect time.
All right.
Thank you very much. And by the way, Mr. Block, we and others, we are actually contemplating a steel-only hearing.
Great.
So we could work through those issues. Mr. Arnold, appreciate you here from Fram Renewable Fuels.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. Fram is a small company and formed in South Georgia. We make wood pellets. Wood pellets are wood fiber that's been dried and compressed into a pellet form, and the purpose of doing this is to enhance the transportation and logistics of it and increase the energy density when it's burned. The uses of wood pellets are for the residential stove and heating market. Mostly that market is in the upper Midwest and the Northeast in the United States. Combined heat and power plants in Europe use wood pellets extensively, where they generate heat for communities or large office complexes and a little bit of electricity and provide steam for industrial off-takers. And then large-scale power generation in Europe, wood pellets can be used as a renewable fuel component to displace coal, and because of treaty obligations, they have to have an increasing amount of renewable fuel in their fuel mix every year. Because of the Kyoto Treaty and other obligations that they have, such as the 20-20-20 targets, the 20% reduction in greenhouse gases, they're looking for 20% of the mix from renewable fuels and 20% from improved energy efficiency. Wood pellets are a low-cost form in this, and what they've found there in markets such as the UK is that you can base load your power grid with wood pellets, whereas intermittent sources, very good sources with cheap fuel like solar and wind, you can't base load. We manufacture in America. We have Appling County Pellets in Baxley, Georgia. We employ 40 people there. Original investment about $25 million. That mill originally had a design capacity of 130,000 tons. We've recently expanded that by another 100,000 tons up to 230. February of last year, we constructed a joint venture operation in Lumber City, Georgia, where we can produce another 125,000 tons, a $10 million investment, and created 14 or 15 jobs there. We have just broken ground on a new plant to be constructed in Hazelhurst, Georgia, in 2 phases. The first phase will employ 62 people, produce 300,000 tons per year, and then it will be expanded later. Another $30 million investment with 2 additional lines, and increase the employment by about another 20 people in that. We do aggregate pellets from other very small producers in Georgia, and we expect to export over 450,000 tons this year, and we expect to double that next year. The foreign market is the demand that FRAM feeds. That demand, the U.S. exported about 1.5 million tons in 2012. We expect that to grow to over 12 million tons in the next 10 years. So it's an area with tremendous growth in it. We have been helped by various government programs that are in place. The USDA rural loan guarantees were very helpful in us in establishing our plants. We have availed those. The investment and production tax credits, of course, are very helpful to us. Port infrastructure is in the U.S. is somewhat lacking, and the work that the Corps of Engineers is doing to improve that with dredging is very important to us. And you know, in budget constraints, hopefully they get enough to keep the channels open so we can keep the ships going in and out. Thank you very much for inviting me up to tell our little story of our little company. We expect the global demand for the products that we're making to increase. The U.S. can be at the forefront in this and develop many things as we go along. And we're just on the edge of a raw materials coming from bio sources that's going to really help in a lot of ways. Companies like Bridgestone are making tires now entirely from plant matter, and we'll see a lot of things like this develop out of our industry as things move along. So this is a great country to be in and a great time to be in the forest industry.
Well, thank you. I've asked for a wood pellet grill, so I'm with you. Mr. Saxton, I appreciate you being here today. Geldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Schakowsky, members of the subcommittee, and especially Congressman Welch for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ron Saxton, and I'm an Executive Vice President of Geldwin, and I also serve on the board of the Window and Door Manufacturers Association and the Executive Committee of the National Association of Manufacturers. Geldwin began in 1960 in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and is now one of the world's leading manufacturers of windows and doors. Geldwin employs 20,000 people across more than 100 locations in the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Australia. In the United States, Geldwin manufactures in 17 states and employs approximately 9,000 people. Vermont is an example of our commitment to U.S. market. As Congressman Welch knows, we employ over 800 people there in two-door facilities in Ludlow and North Springfield. Well before the term sustainability was popular, Geldwin adopted an ethos that the efficient use of our natural resources was a critical aspect of manufacturing. One example of our sustainability ethic at work is a facility where we utilize wood waste from our window frame manufacturing plant to create door skin products in a neighboring facility. While Geldwin sells products into both commercial and home remodeling markets, our strength as a company and job creator is intimately tied to the new housing construction market. With the steep decline in housing starts, the last 6 years have been very challenging for everyone in the housing industry. The slow, steady recovery in housing is having a positive impact on our bottom line, and we are hiring again, almost 1,000 people in the last year. However, as you're well aware, what you do in Washington can have a positive or disruptive impact on our industry. Consistency and predictability with regard to housing, finance, and regulatory policy are necessary, and I would like to highlight some energy efficiency policies that have significant impact on Geldwin and our industry. In remodeling, doors and windows are very important products. They're important to manufacturers like Geldwin, but they're also an important part of the U.S. energy debate. To illustrate this, consider that much of the existing housing stock in the United States uses single-pane windows manufactured prior to the late 1970s. If America focused on replacing the almost 1 billion single-pane windows in older homes with new energy-efficient windows, we could avoid the need for literally dozens of new power plants. Clearly, Geldwin would benefit, but a broad commitment to improving the energy efficiency of existing housing would be a boon to American employers and consumers well beyond window and door companies. The not-too-distant past shows how government action can move markets. In 2009, at the height of the housing collapse, Congress passed a significant 2-year tax incentive for energy-efficient residential products, including windows. The enhanced 25C tax incentive attracted consumers to energy-efficient products and saved jobs across the sector, from manufacturers to distributors to installers. In addition to providing a bridge to better times, it locked in energy savings for years to come. Recent bipartisan efforts to utilize incentives beyond the tax code have been led by members of this committee, most notably Representatives Welch and McKinley. We hope you will continue with those efforts in the 113th Congress. A good energy policy is also a good job strategy. However, misaligned energy policy, even if well-intentioned, can hamstring growth. Jeld-Wen has been an Energy Star partner since 1998 and past Partner of the Year in both the United States and the Canadian Energy Star programs. As such, we're very concerned that recently proposed changes to that program relative to our products are a mistake for consumers and homeowners, as well as manufacturers. Energy Star for Windows has been a phenomenally successful program. For decades, it has pointed the consumer toward the best and most cost-effective energy-saving products. Through active collaboration with industry, the program has offered a voluntary and informative system that has promoted energy efficiency, consumer economic benefit, and encouraged manufacturing in the United States. Today, the EPA is considering changing the criteria for Energy Star rated windows to a point where there is no realistic cost effectiveness for consumers, and we fear the long-respected program will become irrelevant. We are working diligently with the EPA to fix the issue, but a standard that does not recognize a balance of cost effectiveness with energy efficiency threatens to dramatically and negatively impact an extraordinarily popular and effective program. In closing, I want to reiterate just 2 points. First, a stable, strong housing construction market is important to all of us, from my son and daughter-in-law looking to buy their first home to companies like Jeld-Wen that supply materials for home construction. Second, there's an important and constructive role that the government can play in energy efficiency, but if programs like EPA's Energy Star program are pushed beyond standards that consumers recognize, those programs marginalize benefits to everyone. I thank the committee for your time and attention.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all of your testimony. It's been very insightful, and I'll recognize myself for the first question because I get to. But what I'm curious, and several of you have put it into your testimony, but I want to highlight that. So what I want each to do, 8 of us in 4.5 minutes, to be able to just say 1, 2, maybe 3 things that if someone came to you and said, we need you to expand your production, give me one of the things that you would worry that would be a barrier or something that we can do that would really make it easier for that to happen. Mr. Hughes, we'll start with you since you've just sat there the longest.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The top of my list would be reforms in the tax codes and regulations. The best way for us to expand our manufacturing and product base is to become more affordable. Over the years, we've had numerous affordability programs. We have been able to drop the product prices. We've been able to drop and hold steady our labor rates. We need to go look at the other aspects of costs which affect our competitiveness in the marketplace.
So I just quickly answer that focus on U.S. tax rates. When we expanded Gorilla Glass, we had the choice to expand in the U.S., Korea, Taiwan, or Japan, and higher U.S. tax rates make it more difficult to justify an expansion.
Limiting my comments to the area of preparedness for an epidemic or a safety hazard, I think it would be close coordination with the government on what areas and what types of products we need to expand our capacity so that we're working in concert to make sure we're addressing the right products for the events that we need to prepare for in the future.
Good point. Mr. Myers?
Thank you. For us in our industry, obviously uncertainty with regulations is a huge issue with us, and it plays a major role in what we do as far as expansions and what we look at. I echo the gentleman to my right, and tax codes are very important to us as well for all small manufacturers, because that uncertainty as well will either ultimately decide on whether we expand or whether we do not.
I don't think we have a barrier that exists with our company today. I think the challenge that we faced is getting our consumers and folks out in the communities to switch to that healthier lifestyle and consume more water, quite honestly.
Okay. Mr. Block?
Probably the barriers that I would see to us would be, certainly taxes are always an issue. Not necessarily the particular level of taxes for myself, but to see a fair and simplified and more equitable tax code across the nation so that there's more of a level playing field. I think that would be fairly important. I also would like to see harmonization of, environmental or regulatory issues, so that there isn't a competition necessarily between states to who can be the least regulatory, or even, if possible, or to the amount feasible worldwide to a degree, so that there's a harmonization of regulatory issues that gives pretty much a level playing field.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold?
I would say number one is access to capital. At 21 years old, I could walk in a bank. I inherited that, I guess, from my father and grandfather, but it's much easier to borrow capital than it is today. It's very, very difficult and time-consuming, and you need a raft of legal counsel, accounting, and all to make those things happen. The second thing would be access in an export business, access to sufficient port infrastructure, and keeping the channels and waterways open. Those are things we can't do. We can build a manufacturing plant, but we can't do those things.
Interesting. Mr. Sexton?
If the market gives us the opportunity to expand, there are no barriers that are going to stop us. The one concern that we do have, which one of the previous witnesses mentioned, is the labor force. As I said, we've hired 1,000 new workers in the last year, and we're continuing to expand, and the reality is that with high unemployment rates, we've been very surprised how hard it is to hire qualified workers in many places.
It's interesting you mention. I've actually heard that from other manufacturers in Omaha. One that had 5 welding positions open for months, and they couldn't get them filled. So I appreciate that. The ranking member is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Let me just follow up on that. How many of you have found it hard to fill slots with qualified workers? Can you just raise your hand? We have an issue here that I think our committee ought to definitely explore.
That's 7 of the 8 raised their hands.
Yeah. And who didn't? Was it Mr. Haller?
Okay.
So you're able to hire?
Within my limited scope with 3M, I really can't speak for the whole company, but oftentimes we have many candidates for different roles at 3M, and we're known as an innovative company, and oftentimes can attract many employees.
Good. Let me also continue along the line of workers and talk to my friend and neighbor and business in my district, Mr. Block. We know that global competition in manufacturing is far more intense today than it was 3 decades ago. The result in advances of transportation and communication, and increasingly free flow of international trade, and consumers have benefited from that with lower prices on many everyday products, and multinational firms have benefited from various savings related to cost of labor. But the impact of globalization on smaller manufacturers and American workers is far more uneven. You mentioned even playing field a couple of times. So in your testimony, you mentioned the unsustainability of the race by businesses to find the lowest cost wages or lowest taxes around the world, and you called for a level playing field to help ensure that companies large and small compete on innovation, better products, better business practices, instead of on cutting wages and benefits. I wondered if you could elaborate on this recommendation and how you believe it might help American manufacturing workers.
Well, sure. I think that part of it stems...
Put your mic on, yeah.
Part of it stems from how our company was founded and how we approach how we deal with our employees. And ever since the inception of our company, we've treated our employees like family. We've always paid very good wages, and we've always created a situation where they've had pretty good health benefits. And when we see situations where competition, new competition comes into areas, whether it would be from overseas or whether it would be in other locations, and they start up businesses with a much lower cost structure, perhaps they do have those wages or they don't provide those health benefits, it really keeps an unlevel playing, it creates an unlevel playing field to a degree. And that's why, from our point of view, we don't want to be a race to the bottom. We don't want to have to survive by cutting benefits, by cutting wages to my employees. I know when I was, I don't, if I can expand on this, but I know a lot of us, when I was growing up, I always thought that America, the land of opportunity, things would always get better, and there was always an opportunity for advancement. And it just kills me today personally when I see workers who've worked for 20, 30, 40 years having to deal with having their wages cut, having to have to deal with their benefits cut. And I'm not naive. I understand that we live in a world in which there's competition for labor and there's competition for resources. But is it fair that the United States should have to follow the lead of whether it would be Asian countries or whatever countries it is, that we have to bring our wages down to match that? Would it not be better if we put in place leveling the playing field, that they eventually would have to bring their wages up or their health care costs or whatever the case may be? And that troubles me, because these consumers who are having their wages cut are the very people who buy the products that I certainly supply to the marketplace, the cars, the appliances, or whatever, or houses, as the case may be.
Thank you. That was kind of Henry Ford's idea, that he wanted his workers to be able to buy his cars. I wanted to talk about the uncertainty from current fiscal policy, because we're facing so many issues right now. And I just wondered, with the idea, for example, Mr. Hughes, of sequestration, which would affect your business, it seems to me, would actually, let me just ask you, would it be correct to say that sequester would threaten economic harm to the aerospace industry?
Well, first off, let me say that, we share the concerns expressed by the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs regarding the impact of sequestration should it be implemented. And yes, we are concerned about the impact on the business if indiscriminate budget cuts are made. It's difficult for us right now to anticipate the level or the exact mechanism by which those cuts will be implemented. So the exact impact to any program or any facility is difficult for us to predict. But if you take large quantities of funding out of a system, it will have an impact.
So the lack of predictability itself is a problem, though, is it not?
Yes, and the uncertainty is absolutely problematic.
Can I ask just one raise of hands? Raise your hand if you feel that your business would be better off in 2013 if there were greater certainty and predictability right now in the outlook for fiscal policy. So if you, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Barton, you were recognized.
I love to be recognized, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to ask, since Mr. Myers is my friend and from my district, and he's in the oil patch, what his view is on the competitiveness as related to natural gas prices in the United States. Does that help your industry or hurt your industry?
Well, thank you, Congressman Barton. Obviously, the competitiveness in the industry has been a benefit to most metal casters, because we have seen quite an increase in products going out to the energy sector. One of the things that we do face with the natural gas industry and its increasing competitiveness is also a competitiveness for some of our raw products, one being sand. That's a big issue for us in Texas and foundries and metal casters. But I think overall, if you look at the increase in energy, specifically natural gas and oil, that increase has been beneficial to us manufacturing, not only just for foundry corporations or companies, but also across the board to people producing machines for other various reasons.
As a fuel source, though, do you use a lot of natural gas in your foundry? Is that a base load fuel for your foundry?
We use some natural gas, but primarily it's all electric run. So in a tangible way, the natural gas prices do affect our operations because of the energy cost. We've seen energy cost maintain a pretty stable level for the past year and a half, but some forecasts are now starting to trend up. So that will be an issue as we move through this year into next year, and some of our contracts, our 6 to 8 month contracts, begin to expire, and we move forward on new contract negotiations.
Well, I'll ask Mr. Steiner Corning the same thing. What I'm trying to get at is the fact that we've used hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling in our shale formations and dropped natural gas prices so that they're the lowest in the world. I'm told that helps our competitiveness in our base manufacturing sector because of the lower natural gas prices. Have you found that to be the case, Mr. Steiner?
Yes, it takes a lot of energy to melt sand at 1,200 degrees, so our melting units are both natural gas and electric fired, so the competitiveness of natural gas certainly helps us.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit with Mr. Arnold. My first question is just kind of serendipitous, but when I saw Fram, I thought oil filters. Is your company related at all to the Fram oil filter company?
No, sir, we're not. One of our investors is Norwegian roots, and Fram in the Norwegian language means onward and upward. Oh, okay. And it was also the name of a wooden polar exploration vessel that is in a museum in Oslo that was near and dear to his heart. He used the word Fram in many of his companies.
Okay. Now, my friends on the minority side, on the Democrat side, are always talking about green jobs and how great green jobs are. I'm not anti-green job. I think I have finally seen an example of a green energy company that actually makes a little sense, and that's yours. From what little bit I was able to gather from your testimony, your company takes wood and makes it into pellets and sells the pellets for fuel. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, what % of your market is residential in the United States versus exported overseas for baseload power plants in Europe?
100% of our market is export. Early on in the formation of our company, we were a participant in the domestic market, but logistically, we're too far removed from the Northeast where the concentration of residences with wood pellet stoves is. It is actually more economical for us to ship into Europe than it is to ship into Maine.
I want the subcommittee to understand this. We don't have cap and trade in the United States, so we're using natural gas and coal and nuclear for our baseload power plants pretty much. But in Europe they do. Right. But it's more competitive to pelletize wood in the United States, ship it to Europe, use it as a baseload fuel source, in spite of the fact that your BTU content as compared to coal is not all that good, but because you're renewable, you get credit in Europe, and we're burning wood pellets just like we used to burn wood here in the United States for transportation on the railroad. So it's kind of odd that we're doing it that way, but it's good for you and your company and the people in Georgia. Are there a lot of companies like yours that are springing up to do that?
There's a growing number of companies, but to make it clear on what's going on there is The European utilities are required to use a renewable fuel by government dictate, and it's not more economical to them than using coal.
But it
is an
they're
economical,
mandated to do it, so it's helping us.
It is helping us.
Their mandate in Europe is creating green jobs in the United States.
It's creating green jobs, and also there's an evolution going on in the technology. We're building our third mill now, and each one of them has great improvements in technology and efficiency, which will lower the cost of it, and eventually will help.
I'm all for a renewable fuel mandate in Europe.
All right, Mr. McNerney from California, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I spent about 10 years in manufacturing before coming to Congress, and so I found this to be a very interesting panel, and I appreciate your coming out here and talking to us. I have a couple of observations. Mr. Smatsky, I really appreciated your comments on the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, and that's adopted. Could you explain what that means a little bit, and maybe give us a hint of how you think that could be more widely adopted in the United States?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The cradle-to-cradle philosophy is really about recycling and reuse and getting the bottle back. About 27% across the United States currently today have recycle programs. So we need to develop the recycling aspect to get the bottles back. Currently, right now, we're working on recycled PET bottles that we're introducing in the California marketplace, as well as in our Deer Park spring water brand.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Meyer, I found your comments about the lack of appropriately trained workers to be concerning, as did the ranking member and other members of the subcommittee. And it sounds like you've taken steps in your company to help ensure that you're going to have those workers that you need. Do you see that as the way education is going to be going in this country, where the private sector has to take a more strong step, a more strong active role in providing for educated workers, or do you think the public education system is going to be able to step up and provide that service?
Okay, well, thank you. First of all, that's correct. I do believe that the private sector is pushing technical trade training, and that's very obvious when you look at our sector and any manufacturing job in specific. It's just not something that is pushed at the local level or through public schools, so we were proactive in that in approaching our local college there to look at technical trade programs. And as we talk to other foundries throughout the country, they're basically doing the same thing, if not just for the lack of skilled workers or tradesmen, simply because in our state we look at the competition with other sectors. For us, it is very difficult because a lot of our skilled workers and tradesmen will either go to work in the oil field or in areas such as higher level manufacturing in the aerospace or defense. So it's very hard, and either way you look at it, it's very competitive for the workforce, and we are not seeing the increases in the workforce that we need.
Well, thank you. Mr. Hughes, I know Raytheon has made significant contributions towards STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Could you elaborate a little bit on the direction that Raytheon is moving and how that could be replicated by smaller companies?
Absolutely. So as an engineering company, we're very concerned with the decline in interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Our industry is very dependent on a robust source of engineers and scientists for us to deliver the kind of innovation and technology that the country needs. We have created a series of programs at a variety of levels, both the local, state, and at the university levels, for encouraging younger folks to go into that field of work.
Have you found that to be effective, that program to be effective?
Yes, we have. We have over the years now spent in excess of $72 million promoting STEM in a variety of different venues, up to and including with the Smithsonian Institute. I would encourage companies across the board, but particularly those who are very dependent on high-skilled workers, to look into doing similar types of activities, because we do find that the younger folks, when they get into it, really start to become interested in it. And I think that's very important for the future of our country and for national security. And I would encourage the Congress to look into programs that could accomplish the same thing.
So somehow Congress might be able to give incentives to smaller companies to get engaged in the way that the larger company like
Smaller
Raytheon.
companies, school districts, teachers, there are a variety of different ways. I think communications to younger folks is a major factor. The more they know about it, I think the more interest that can be generated. It is for the high-tech industry, a decline in interest in STEM is a concern for the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the panel in general, to what extent does the fact that the Chinese currency does not float freely have an impact on your manufacturing? Mr. Block?
I think it's certainly a big problem, and you know, the whole, in my industry, which is the steel industry, the whole China situation is certainly very complex. But just a few statistics: the raw steel production in China, they have excess capacity of something around 200 million tons of excess capacity to produce steel. And we don't even really know for sure because the industry, the steel industry in China is very fragmented. But there's an estimate today that 50 to 70% of the world's productive capacity to produce steel is in China. And what that creates is obviously on a global scale huge market manipulation in theory, because if the Chinese decide to go on a policy to just produce steel at a crazy rate and sell it on the world market, it will drive prices down, which may or may not be good depending upon which side of the supply chain you're on, but certainly would not be good for the American steel industry.
Thank you. Is your company, is it called Block Steel or is it Inland Steel?
Block Steel.
Block Steel.
You're thinking probably of Joseph Block?
Yes.
That's not related.
Not related.
He was the chairman of Inland Steel.
But that was in the Middle West, was it not?
Correct. Inland Steel was actually in, the remnant of Inland Steel is still there. It's owned by ArcelorMittal now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And to the panel in general on an issue that had been raised earlier, we're going to be engaged in reform, I hope this year, on corporate tax policy, Ways and Means more so than E&C, but certainly an important issue to us all. What would you suggest as we try to have a better corporate tax system in this country? Yes, sir.
In general, American businesses pay among the highest corporate tax rates in the world.
Yes, sir.
We compete internationally. International sales are of a benefit to our customers and to the economy in general. The higher tax rates cause us to be less competitive in the international marketplace. So anything that could be done to reduce overall tax rates and make U.S. products more competitive in the marketplace would be very helpful. It would also be very helpful to have that coupled with a substantial research and development incentive, which is also common internationally.
And, of course, certainly in that area of making sure the R&D portion is permanent and does not have to be extended periodically by the Congress.
Absolutely.
A final question to the panel. Manufacturing's future needs, besides your current concerns, what do you think might be the next big thing to confound growth in your industries, and what challenges are you likely to face looking forward in the next 5 to 10 years or even 10 to 20 years?
So as we try to deal with the potential for budget cuts, we've been focused on international sales. International sales, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, benefit this country in a number of ways. A lot of development can go on those programs that our U.S. customers can take advantage of. The bulk of the jobs are here in the U.S. They're not overseas, at least in my industry, which tends to offset some of the earlier discussions today. So I do believe that, you know, the ability to expedite international sales in my industry is a stabilizing influence going forward. One of the things we see competing internationally is that we compete not only with companies, but we compete with countries. So it would be very helpful to get congressional and administrative advocacy for the promotion of international sales. That would be a big help. Fully fund all of the international security assistance programs, which enable U.S. allies to make the purchases of the systems that they need. And then finally, streamline the arms sale process in general. I know that's something that's it's been talked about recently. It can be a lengthy process. Anything that can be done to expedite that would help this entire situation and boost manufacturing in the U.S.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now we recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Arnold, I want to follow up on some of the leads that were opened up by my friend Mr. Barton from Texas, because he talked about one of two trends we've discussed today that I think provide an object lesson. Each provides an object lesson in the tension or the debate between folks who say we ought to put mandates out in front of technology in the blind hope that technology will catch up to the mandates on the one hand, and folks who think, no, we ought to invest in technology, put the technology out in front of the mandates, and the mandates will take care of themselves. He brought up one of these trends, the fact that Europe has imposed conditions on the marketplace that are not market-based at all. They've imposed mandates on the marketplace that say you've got to go do something you're not doing now. And the unintended consequence of that is, at the cost of European utility consumers, we're investing in research and development here in this country where the raw materials to meet that artificial mandate can be found, and where it's stimulating research and development in your area. Not exactly what I think they contemplated, but that's what's happening as a result of that approach to put the mandate out in front of the technology. The nearest available technology may be in America. We may be benefiting from it in the 12th District of Georgia as a result of what's going on there at their expense, but not the expense of our utility consumers. Likewise, we've talked about what's going on with fracking, the fact that there's been an explosion in the source of a traditional source of energy, but that's been inaccessible to us because of our inability to get to it because of our technology. But what's happening now? If you listen to Ted Nordhaus and folks at the Breakthrough Institute, they'll tell you this is a direct payoff of 35 years of investment in very basic research that is only coming to fruition now, stuff that was started during the Carter years. So this is what's happening in natural gas is the payoff of an investment in technology ahead of mandates. Without cap and trade, we've achieved tremendous reductions in CO2, and we've exploded the available natural gas to our consumers because we invested in technology, not mandates. Now, that's a lead-in to when I ask you, what do you think we ought to be doing in the area of research and development? How can government help encourage and incentivize manufacturers to invest in research that will provide a long-term payoff? What do you think ought to be our priorities in that area?
I think the priorities in that area should be a very broad base, putting as much research and development money in small amounts into as many different companies as you can to foster as many ideas out there, because out of there will come the one that will pay off in the beginning. As Thomas Edison said, he's found out 1,000 different ways not to make a light bulb. That's what we have to have in this country to keep bringing new technology to the forefront. There'll have to be some pull in some technologies and in some markets to get people involved. But there also we need a lot of research and development, and it needs to be academic tied to industry sponsorship in some way. But it doesn't need to be giant block grants from the Department of Energy or anybody else that goes to one segment of one industry to one company where success or failure has used up all of that money. It can be used in many, many different places, in my opinion.
My friend Tom Fanning, the head of the Southern Company, is fond of describing sort of an S-curve in what you can get from research. There's a small amount that's spent at the most basic level, of most basic pure research, where you don't know where it's going to lead. Then there's a tremendous amount of money that's in the high part of the S-curve, in which folks are researching how to develop a lead, something that's come out of basic research. And then there's the deployment phase, where it levels off again, where you're just trying to deploy something that you've got ready to go in the marketplace. His position is that government ought to confine its investments or its incentives when they're at the most basic level possible, that the highest payoff will be from investing in that very basic research where there's very little support that you can get from the private sector to get the kind of breakthroughs that you need. But the private sector is good at taking off with that. What do you think about that? Is that a model that we should build on?
I personally think that's a very good model to build on, and that's the kind of things that we look for is reading some research paper where somebody has stumbled across an idea, and then I can take that idea and improve our processes or come up with a completely different business model out of that.
I think of the difference between investing in something like Dharma, where they're doing incredibly basic research on the one hand, and the payoffs you get from that, as opposed to investing in a development or deployment strategy for a big old outfit like Soylendra. I can't help but think that the biggest payoff is investing at the front end of that S-curve, where there's the least amount of outside money that's available through private sources to lead to the kind of development and breakthroughs that the private sector knows what to do with once they've got it. But it's very hard for them to provide that kind of support. That sort of seems to me to be sort of an object lesson.
I would agree with that approach.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Harper is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you for taking the time out. I know it's a very busy schedule for each of you to be here and to shed a little light on your businesses and make us perhaps think outside of the box and to give us some ideas to go forward on how we can make it more conducive to do your business and how we can create and grow jobs in this country. And that's a great thing, and we congratulate you on the successes that you've had. And Mr. Hughes, we're certainly glad to have you here. And I remember the very first time that I came into almost official contact with Raytheon in my district was when I was running, and you had a great advocate there in Forest, Mississippi, Mayor Chambers, who just went on and on about the impact that you had as a company there in East Central Mississippi. And that's, I've been there for Veterans Day events, and the workforce, the team there is exceptional, and you should be very, very proud of what is there and what you see. But how is that support of your local and state government officials? What has that meant to you in Forest, Mississippi?
Well, thank you for the kind words. We are very, very proud of the facility and the workforce there. We have an excellent working relationship with all levels of the government in Mississippi, from local, state, up through this level. Mm-hmm. And it has gone a long way in helping us work with various agencies. We're on a number of statewide initiatives to do everything from expand the use of broadband technology to energy initiatives. Mm-hmm. The workforce is very, very involved in community service. They put in a lot of time on a regular basis And I think that goes a long way to building community spirit, which helps us work with the community when we need to go do something with the facility or find people or expand the facilities. So in general, the working environment has been extremely beneficial to the success of our operation there, and I thank you for it.
Well, we're delighted to have you there, and look forward to working together for many years on that. And you mentioned earlier in your testimony that with us as a country having one of the highest corporate tax rates, you mentioned that as something if you could see done. You talked about tax codes and regulations earlier. If our corporate tax rates were reduced to a level where we were one of the lowest and not highest, what would you see as the benefits that would come from that, and how quickly would we realize the benefits after a change was made?
I think the change would be quite quick. The primary effect would be we would be much more competitive very quickly in the international marketplace, where we're competing with companies that do have lower corporate tax rates. And I think that's the primary factor there. And there is a large potential for foreign sales. But we have to be able to compete. We have to have, as I said, advocacy from the United States government. We have to have affordable prices, and we have to have the ability to export the technology. In many cases, foreign companies, can sell technology that we are not allowed to export out of the U.S. Those are kind of the three things that are that tend to limit our ability.
You mentioned also the regulatory burdens that are there. What area of regulation are you referring to when you say that we need to look at improving? You said the tax code and obviously regulations. Would that be in the area of the export regulations you just referred to?
That would be one area. Just general reporting on a variety of different business processes. We might want to take a look and see how those are being used. Anything that's being used and is meaningful, happy to do it.
Great.
If it's not being used, maybe we ought to think about it.
Again, thank you all for being here. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Guthrie, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks. And to be a witness for Mr. Barton's question, I ran or my family has aluminum foundry. So we're gas. And so it has made us tremendously competitive compared to people that we're competing with in other countries. And, it's all about inputs and how much inputs cost. And anytime if we do mandates and things here that raise the price of energy, it'll go counter to bringing manufacturing jobs back to the country. It's just a fact of that's our competitive advantage in Kentucky, particularly with coal. We have cheap electricity, and it's made us a competitive state. Well, a question with Mr. Steiner. Another thing about tax, I think we heard the other night in the State of the Union about the tax credits that incentivize people to send jobs overseas. One thing that does is our tax rate. So if we want to lower our tax rate, it'll bring jobs back as well. Mr. Steiner, I know you're in Kentucky, obviously, and I know you're there because of the great working employees that are there, but I know the iPhone isn't necessarily completely assembled in the United States. Right. And so why are you competitive in Kentucky? And what decision-making did you go? I know you got a great workforce, but it's interesting to know why you chose to manufacture it here.
So in Corning, we always start with an invention, and then what allows us to compete is a very efficient process. So we spend a lot of our R&D dollars on process efficiency. And the process we use in Kentucky allows us to compete worldwide. But we are hampered by the effective tax rate of a dollar of income out of Harrodsburg is about 39%. And our effective tax rate as a company is 21%. So it's much lower in other areas of the world.
So
we have to offset the tax rate difference with a much more efficient process.
But if you had a lower tax rate, you would still strive to be more efficient just because of competition.
Yes, you always compete with the process first.
Always compete with the process. So, but your process is energy intensive.
It is. So in our process, again, in Harrodsburg, labor, batch materials, and energy are the three major cost components. So
anything that drives your
reduction in
energy
energy costs certainly helps us.
And anything that drives up your energy costs makes you less
makes us less competitive, and that is an advantage we have over other areas of the world in Kentucky.
Specifically in Kentucky, but yeah, as a country as well, most parts of the country.
Correct.
So with the trade agreements that we're talking about, there's the Trans-Pacific and European. What are your issues with that, and what do you?
So again, we about 78% of what we make, we export. In the case of Gorilla Glass, virtually every square foot that's made in Kentucky gets exported outside of the U.S. because industries, as Mr. Block said, to make televisions don't exist in the U.S. yet. So to keep access to global markets is vital to us because we're basically an export company.
That's what's interesting to note about what you do, is that you're not making for the, well, eventually the products come back for the American.
Many of the products come back.
Many of them come back, but you're not, just here making for the domestic market. You're actually exporting and find yourself competitive. But anything that we do here, well, what kind of things could we do to make it better? I know the tax rate, we don't want to affect energy rates.
Access to foreign markets is quite important. The other issue that's very important for us is IP protection. Again, we compete because we invent first and then we invent a process. It's important to have U.S.-style IP protection all over the world, not just in patent law, but in trade secrets. It's a little easier to enforce patents because we can look at a product and tell whether or not it's used our glass composition. Trade secrets is a more difficult issue from us because somebody could copy our manufacturing process, but since you don't have access to it outside of the U.S., you may not know that. So we need fair enforcement all around the world in both patent law and trade secret.
Is some of your decision to manufacture to protect your intellectual property?
So we feel more comfortable, certainly, with our situation in the U.S. A lot of our industries are in China, and that's a constant discussion in Corning of how do we protect ourselves outside of the U.S. like we can within.
Well, you're a great employer, and we really appreciate what you do for that community. It's several big industries there, and a lot of it's driven by energy costs, and we really appreciate what you do. And I actually just picked you guys up in redistricting, so I've been very blessed to represent you. I look forward to working with you.
Thanks, and we appreciate your support.
Thanks. I yield back.
Thank you. And Mr. McKinley, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for assembling the meeting prior to this with the displays, and also for this panel that we have. I guess I'm taking a little bit more of a cynical approach, perhaps. I've been here 2 years in Congress. Years ago, before going to college, I worked on an assembly line. My brother was in the steel industry, working in the mills, and I've seen the demise of the industry over in our area, northern West Virginia. We've lost 30,000 steelworker jobs have been lost because, in part, and primarily because of, I believe, government interaction, government intrusion, government regulations. And I've heard you talk a little bit about that. I've heard a lot of love coming from this side of the table, from people that say they have your best interests at heart. And I would think that manufacturing all should be very robust, given all the love that you're getting from this side of the table. But we've heard comments made about the sequester. We've had two votes on sequester. We're trying to avoid the sequester, but we can't get the other side of the aisle to support us on that. Oh, they'll say they're concerned about it, but we've given them the votes and they don't take them. So I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about where we're going to go with this. I listened to that initial polling. I thought it was a very good question that the chairman came up with, and it was just show of hands, and certainly it wasn't scientific. But when he mentioned tax code and regulations, that's more than all the other combined, the issues that were raised. Tax code and regulation. But yet we can't get the people on certain areas of our Congress to accept that. They think it's more of what we've been doing for the last 4 years in Congress, more regulation, more government intrusion, more taxes, higher energy costs. Is that the direction? Is that what you're telling us now? I'd like to make sure we're going in there. Should we be going in that? Do you really think the last 4 years is the best direction we could go if we're going to make manufacturing all that it can be, where we have American exceptionalism again in our manufacturing? Is this the direction we should continue? Or what would you suggest to wake up members of Congress to understand what it's like to see a demise and struggle within the manufacturing business? Can you give us some direction on where you might give it to us? I heard you say tax code and regulations, but EPA and OSHA, regulatory, tax policy, Obamacare, I've heard how that's affecting businesses all over. The sequestration, R&D, energy costs. What should we be doing? Not just sweet talk, but actual, what can we do? What should we do if we're going to reverse manufacturing the demise? Can a few of you give you some good examples?
Well, thank you for the question. You asked what Congress should do, and honestly, for our industry, the regulations and taxing, health care, everything that we see coming down the pipeline is becoming more burdensome. What you could do is stop.
Thank you.
You could stop. That would allow us to be the manufacturing engine that drives this country.
But why don't you think that people are hearing that? It's so basic. Get government off our backs. Free up that. I hear it time and time again. Manufacturers will get back if we just backed off. But the Congress doesn't seem to want to back off. It thinks it's going in the right direction by becoming more intrusive in your workplace. How do you do it? Why? What are we missing here? Why aren't people listening to you?
Well, basically, we have been vocal for years, and why that has not reached Congress is beyond us. But I think when you look at the jobs lost and how our entire manufacturing sector continues to struggle, when is it going to be too late? When we're all out of business? So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and express our issues of not only my company, but our industry and manufacturers in general.
Thank you. Any others in the time remaining? Yes, sir.
It's not so much the regulation as it is the unknown Congressman Waxman talked about. Gridlock and arguing from both sides is a necessary part of the government process. We need that. But when something is enacted, get to it then on specifically what we've got to do about that. We've had the Obamacare for 2 years now. The only thing I've seen out of that, we provide hospitalization for our employees. Our insurance cost has went up 20% a year for the last 2 years. And yet, it's not even enacted yet. But the anticipation of that, the unknown, the insurance companies have had to respond that way. So what we need is swift action. I talked for a second about the dredging of the entrance to the channel in Brunswick. The Corps of Engineers has been working on that for 4 years. They don't get the allocation of the money to be able to do that completely at one time. So it's piecemealed and it fills right back in. We're in a world where we have to respond to market conditions immediately, and government's not responding as quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson from Ohio, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too appreciate the opportunity for today's hearing and the demonstration of products that we saw earlier. I had several manufacturers from Ohio that displayed their wares, their Thermo Fisher and their orbital mixer, Quanex and their window efficient linings, and of course Magnum Magnetics, one of the few companies that provides flexible magnets to consumers and businesses. I had a line of questions here, but I want to take just a second because we've asked you guys a lot of questions and you've been very gracious to give us your opinion. One of the issues that came out in the State of the Union, it's been alluded to here, several times is the President's insistence that cap and trade is still on the table. Climate control is still a big issue. It probably doesn't come as a surprise to you in eastern and southeastern Ohio, where we have a wealth of oil and natural gas, and the prosperity that that's bringing to our region and to America's ability to become more energy independent and secure. The vast amounts of coal that we have that provides reliable and affordable energy, that's a big issue. And because of where we're located, manufacturing is a big deal. We're in a manufacturing corridor. And I talk to businesses every single day that are saying, Bill, we're in jeopardy of having to lay off our people because we simply cannot keep pace with these rising energy costs as coal-fired power plants shut down, as energy costs go up, as the tax burden and regulations continue to drive up our cost of doing business. We're not going to be here. So let me just ask you've been polled a couple of times now, so for the sake of time, let me just ask one final polling question in my time. How many of you believe that additional climate control regulations coming out of the federal government that are going to drive up your cost of operations, including driving up the cost of the energy that it takes to run your operations, how many of you think that's going to have a negative impact on your ability to grow and expand and hire and innovate within your companies? How many of you think that's going to have a negative impact? The rest of you don't think it's going to, or are you just silent? I got to ask.
For me, it's just beyond the scope of my responsibility.
Mr. Hughes, you don't think climate control regulations are going to have an effect on your business?
So I guess, in my opinion, it depends on how they're implemented.
I qualified that. They're going to raise operating costs. They're going to raise the cost of reliable, affordable energy. It was very specific because that's what's happening with the shutdown of the coal industry, the elimination of coal-fired power plants, and the attack on hydraulic fracturing and our ability to go after fossil fuels. That's going to affect your operating cost. That's going to affect your business?
Well, let me just say that anything that impacts operating costs will theoretically have a negative effect.
Yeah. I realize this is a politically charged question because it's one that the President is very interested in pursuing. I can see the stares and the why are you putting me in this position to have to answer this? Well, folks, I'm going to tell you, you folks are the ones that help us determine what the agenda is and how we fight these battles. If you don't want to see increased operating costs, if you don't want to see your electricity rates go up, then I would simply encourage you, speak out. Speak out in your industries. Speak out when you come here. Let the American people hear what it's doing to manufacturing. You know why we can't stand up a nuclear power plant in America anymore? It's not because of technology. It's not because of permitting. It's because of what David McKinley talked about earlier. It's because we don't manufacture the kind of steel here anymore to enclose nuclear reactors. We have to buy that overseas. And you've got other industries that are in jeopardy of being closed down because of onerous climate control regulations. So I would just encourage you, don't be bashful. You want us to help your industry and spur manufacturing? Give us a voice with the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve on this committee as well. This is an outstanding hearing. And
as long as you continue to think that way.
Thank you. I will. I promise you. This has been outstanding. Now, I want to focus also on the regulation and the overlapping regulation or over-regulation as well. And I want to ask Mr. Smatsky a question. Your testimony briefly touched on how your company and business is regulated by the FDA, but has faced the possibility of also being regulated by the EPA. Can you further explain how your business operations would possibly be impacted by adjusting to a new regulatory scheme? Must you also comply with the sets of state and local regulations? Do your federal regulations again a conflict or overlap with these state and local regulations? Because that's what I keep hearing in my district and in all over the state of Florida. And then what's it going to cost you to comply with these overburdensome regulations, in my opinion? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. In terms of the FDA regulations, they are of the highest standards to protect the consumers. So we feel as a food manufacturer, it's in our best interest to go at the highest level standards, which is above and beyond the EPA. I can't recall the second question that you asked me as well.
Well, in other words, the state and local regulations in general combine with those as well. Do federal regulations ever conflict? I believe they do, and overlap with state and local regulations.
They do, Congressman, although I just don't have enough data at this point in time. I'd have to get back to you to further answer that question to give you more clarity. So I'm happy to submit anything for the record.
Yeah, what does it cost you? I'd like to hear from other members of the panel as well, anyone that wants to jump in. Thank you. Anyone else want to?
We don't really do any particular hot processes or have any issues with the regulatory environment ourselves. Certainly our customers do, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to directly answer that question for my customers and for what they do. Obviously, the mills themselves have certain issues with regulatory situations. I know, Mr. Johnson, I'm not sure which district you cover. I think
Ohio 6, all along the Ohio River.
Oh, okay, but like AK Steel, which is in southwest Ohio, has had environmental issues, which has impacted them. They're difficult issues. I don't know if you want me to expand on this or not, but I might be going off in a tangent here, and it might not be a good thing.
Well, give me a specific example of how you face overlapping regulation.
Well, we personally don't, to be honest with you. I mean, my business is relatively, it's complex in its details, but in the actual factory, it's relatively simple. So we really don't deal with regulations that impact us directly.
Okay. I have one other question, Mr. Chairman. Can you please describe how your manufacturing, and this is for the entire panel, how your manufacturing enterprises fit within the domestic economy, and then how do you impact other businesses and sectors up and down the supply chains? Anyone want to jump in?
Well, obviously with the casting industry, our products are used throughout the U.S. and primarily domestic. And what we see as the beginning user, the beginning process with castings is it's a cascading effect all the way across the entire supply chain. So I want to go back real quickly to what you were asking about regulations and the overlapping. Fortunately, in the great state of Texas, we have regulatory issues that are pro-business, not only from the fact of the areas that they come, but our agencies in the state of Texas work with businesses. It's not they're not coming down against us, but they work with us to help us maintain goals and achievements that we need to look at as far as environmental or safety. So I think that when you talk about overlapping regulations, you know, it's more of a regulatory friendly issue and helping our manufacturers, not constantly bombarding us with regulations and issues that we simply can't do.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you. And so there's no more questions to be asked of you here at the panel, but that doesn't mean that we won't submit questions to you. You or your representatives may probably already know that or have been briefed that we have the opportunity and I have several questions that were kind of prompted from your testimony and answers to questions. So be looking forward to receiving your answers to those. And to all the members, remind you that you have 10 business days to submit questions for the record and ask the witnesses to respond promptly. And then want to mention that the Manufacturer Showcase will open again for an hour after this hearing. And I want to thank all of their help for the showcase, our clerk Kimberly Howard, our press secretary Charlotte Baker, and Caroline Ferguson from the committee. Now, thank you. You guys were awesome. Great testimony and feedback, exactly what we were looking for. So thank you for being here today, and we are adjourned.